MMA fatigue is not just muscle damage. In this video, we are looking at the article, Biochemical and Psychological Markers of Fatigue and Recovery in Mixed Martial Arts Athletes During Strength and Conditioning Training. It was published in Scientific Reports by Ostapiuk-Karolczuk and colleagues. The study followed professional MMA athletes during a 3-week strength and conditioning training block. The researchers measured both body markers and mind markers. They looked at hormones, inflammation, muscle damage, immune markers, and psychological mood states. And the main message is powerful. The body and the mind may recover at different speeds. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Sports Science Insight. Here we break down sports science research into simple, practical, and evidence-based insights for athletes, coaches, students, and practitioners. Let's break it down. MMA is one of the most demanding combat sports. It is not only striking, it is not only grappling, and it is not only strength and conditioning. MMA combines punching, kicking, wrestling, ground fighting, sparring, weight training, circuit training, technical drills, and recovery management. That means the athlete is exposed to multiple stressors at the same time. The muscles are stressed, the cardiovascular system is stressed, the hormonal system is stressed, the immune system is challenged, and the mind is under pressure too. This is why MMA recovery is complex. A fighter may look physically prepared, but still be accumulating psychological fatigue. So the key idea is this: MMA training loads the muscles, hormones, immune system, and mind. This study followed 10 male MMA athletes. They were experienced athletes, with around 7 years of training experience. The study tracked them across a 3-week training period. Measurements were taken at 4 time points. T0 was the baseline. T1 was after the first week, T2 was after the second week, and T3 was after the third week. At each time point, the researchers collected blood samples and applied the POMS questionnaire. POMS stands for Profile of Mood States. It measures psychological dimensions such as fatigue, tension, anger, confusion, depression, and vigor. So the researchers were not just asking, what happened in the blood? They were also asking, how did the athletes feel? The study tracked fatigue week by week. The training load was heavy. The athletes trained 6 days per week. They completed 2 daily sessions. That added up to about 18 hours of training per week. The program included circuit training, weight training, technical drills, sparring, and wrestling. Sparring sessions were especially demanding, with perceived effort scores around RPE 7 to 9. That means hard to very hard. This was not casual training. It was a dense combat sport workload. And that matters because MMA athletes do not only need to recover from one type of stress. They need to recover from repeated muscular damage, high-intensity work, technical demands, contact, and mental pressure. So, when we look at fatigue in MMA, we need to look beyond one single marker. The researchers used an integrated monitoring approach. On the body side, they measured cortisol, testosterone, creatine kinase, hs-CRP, catecholamines, and other blood markers. Cortisol is often used as a stress-related hormone. Testosterone is linked with anabolic and recovery-related processes. Creatine kinase, or CK, is commonly used as a marker of muscle damage. And hs-CRP is a marker related to inflammation. On the mind side, they used POMS. This allowed them to track mood states such as fatigue, tension, anger, confusion, depression, and vigor. This is important because recovery cannot be understood from one marker alone. An athlete is not just a blood test, and an athlete is not just a questionnaire. The best picture comes from combining both body markers and mind markers together. One of the first findings was the hormonal stress response. Cortisol increased significantly after the first week of training. That means the first week triggered a clear stress response. After that, cortisol stabilized and showed some reduction later in the training block. Testosterone, on the other hand, remained relatively stable. The testosterone to cortisol ratio dipped slightly, but the change was not statistically significant. This pattern suggests that the training block produced physiological stress, especially early on. But it did not create a strong testosterone decline across the 3 weeks. That is important. The athletes were stressed, but not necessarily showing a complete endocrine breakdown. So the correct interpretation is balanced. The first week created a strong stress signal, while some adaptation appeared later. But hormonal data alone does not tell the whole story. The muscle damage and inflammation markers told another part of the story. Creatine kinase increased significantly after the first week. This suggests substantial muscle damage from the training load. Even though CK later showed some downward movement, it remained elevated. That means muscle strain was still present. The inflammatory marker hs-CRP also increased early in the training period. That suggests an acute inflammatory response. Then, hs-CRP showed partial reduction later in the block. TNF-alpha, another inflammatory marker, stayed relatively stable. So the picture is not simple. The muscles showed damage, the immune system showed stress. But some markers also suggested partial adaptation. The muscles and immune system showed the cost of training. And that cost needs to be monitored, especially during intense MMA preparation. Now comes one of the most important findings. The psychological signal kept worsening across the training block. POMS showed that fatigue increased, tension increased, anger increased, confusion increased, and vigor decreased. Vigor is the positive energy side of mood, so when vigor goes down while fatigue goes up, that is a warning sign for readiness. This is important because some biochemical markers started to improve later in the study. But the athletes still reported high subjective fatigue and lower vigor. In other words, the body may begin to adapt, but the mind may still feel drained. For coaches, this matters a lot. A fighter may complete the session. The blood markers may look less alarming. But psychologically, the athlete may still be moving deeper into fatigue. This is the central lesson of the article. Body recovery is not always the same as mental recovery. Some biochemical markers showed partial recovery. Cortisol declined after the early stress response. hs-CRP also showed some reduction later in the training block. But subjective fatigue persisted, mood disturbance remained elevated, and vigor stayed reduced. That creates a disconnect. On paper, the athlete may appear to be recovering, but internally, the athlete may still feel exhausted. This is why relying only on biomarkers can be risky. Blood markers are useful, but they are not enough. A fighter can look recovered on paper and still feel drained. That is why mood monitoring matters, especially in a sport as intense as MMA. So what should coaches, strength and conditioning professionals, and athletes take from this study? First, monitor biomarkers when possible. Markers like CK, cortisol, and hs-CRP can help identify muscle damage, stress, and inflammation. Second, monitor mood. Simple tools like POMS, wellness questionnaires, or structured fatigue scales can reveal signs that blood markers may not fully capture. Third, individualize recovery. Not every athlete responds the same way to the same training block. Fourth, watch for overtraining risk. Persistent fatigue, low vigor, rising tension, and poor recovery perception should not be ignored. Fifth, recovery should include more than passive rest. Sleep hygiene, nutrition, stress management, breathing strategies, mindfulness, and psychological support can all matter. The bottom line is this: in MMA, recovery is biological and psychological. If this video helped you, leave a like, subscribe to Sports Science Insight, and stay tuned for more evidence-based content on training, recovery, performance, and combat sports science. And tell me in the comments, would you trust blood markers alone to decide if a fighter is recovered? Or should mood and psychological readiness always be part of the process? See you in the next breakdown.